Good morning. Today I've got one of my absolute favourite stories that I loved reading to my own children to share with you. It's called Ticky, Boom Boom by Pat Thomson, and it's again from the Puffin book of 5-minute stories. Ananse, the trickster, had a very fine vegetable garden. He had every vegetable imaginable. Plenty of potatoes and more yams than he could eat. But there was one thing he did not have: a flower garden. And Ananse wanted above all to have flowers, just like a rich man. I shall turn the yam patch into a flower garden, he decided, and I shall make Mr. Tiger dig the flower bed for me. And now, Mr. Tiger had been tricked by Ananse before, and he was cautious. "What will you give me if I dig out the yams?" he asked. "You may keep all the yams you dig up," replied Ananse. Mr. Tiger was satisfied with that. He loved to eat yams. So early next morning he began to dig Ananse's garden for him. All day he dug and dug. But the harder he worked, the deeper the yams seemed to sink into the ground. By the end of the day, Ananse's garden was thoroughly turned over. But Mr. Tiger had not been able to get any yams for himself at all. Mr. Tiger was hot, tired, and furious. This was another of Ananse's tricks. He lost his temper and chopped at one of the yams. He chopped it into little pieces and then set off for home, muttering angrily. "Wow, wow, 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 wow." What was that? Behind him, Mr. Tiger heard a noise. A shuffling noise at first, and then a stamping of small feet. Mr. Tiger turned around, and along the road behind him, walking on little vegetable legs, came the yams. The noise that their feet made went like this: ticky, picky, boom, boom. Ticky, picky, boom, boom. Ticky, picky, boom, boom, poof. Tiger began to run. The yams began to run too. Tiger began to gallop. The yams began to gallop. Tiger jumped. The yams jumped. Mr. Tiger made straight for Mr. Dog's house, running as fast as he could. "Brother Dog," he shouted, "hide me! The yams are coming!" "All right," said Brother Dog. "Hide behind me, but don't say a word." So Mr. Tiger hid behind Dog. And down the road came the yams, and the noise that their feet made sounded like this: ticky, picky, boom, boom. Ticky, picky, boom, boom. Ticky, picky, boom, boom, poof. The yams said, "Brother Dog, have you seen Mr. Tiger?" And Brother Dog looked straight ahead and said, "I can't see Mr. Tiger anywhere, not at all." But Mr. Tiger was so frightened that he called out, "Don't tell them, Brother Dog!" And Dog was so cross that he ran off and left Mr. Tiger to the yams. And the yams jumped, and Tiger jumped. And the yams ran, and Tiger ran, and the yams galloped, and Tiger galloped. Then Mr. Tiger saw Sister Duck and all her little ducklings, so he hurried up to her and said, "Sister Duck, Hide me! The yams are coming!" "All right," said Sister Duck. "Get behind me, but don't say a word." So Mr. Tiger hid behind Sister Duck, and down the road came the yams, and the noise that their feet made sounded like this: ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, poof! The yams said, "Sister Duck, have you seen Mr. Tiger?" And Sister Duck looked straight ahead and said, "Well now, I can't see him anywhere, not at all." But Mr. Tiger was so frightened he shouted out, "Don't tell them, Sister Duck!" And Sister Duck was so cross that she moved away and left him to the yams. And the yams jumped, and Tiger jumped, and the yams ran, and Tiger ran, and the yams galloped, and Tiger galloped. He galloped and galloped, but he was getting tired, and still he could hear the yams coming along the road behind him, getting nearer and nearer. At last he came to a stream, and over the stream was a little plank bridge. On the other side was Mr. Goat. Mr. Tiger ran across the bridge and called out, "Mr. Goat, hide me! The yams are coming!" "All right," said Mr. Goat, "but don't say a word." So Mr. Tiger hid behind Mr. Goat. And down the road came the yams, and the noise that their feet made sounded like this: ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, poof! When they reached the bridge, they called out, "Mr. Goat, have you seen Mr. Tiger?" And Mr. Goat looked straight ahead, but before he could say anything, Mr. Tiger shouted out, "Don't tell them, Mr. Goat, don't tell them!" The yams jumped onto the bridge, but so did Mr. Goat, and he just put down his head and butted them into the stream. Then Mr. Goat and Mr. Tiger picked the pieces out of the water and took them home to make a great feast of yams. But they certainly did not invite Ananse to the feast. When the nights are dark, Mr. Tiger stays at home. He dare not walk along the road, for behind him he still thinks he hears a noise which sounds like this: ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, ticky picky boom boom, poof! I hope you enjoyed that story. Please subscribe to my channel if you want to get notifications of more.